So the end of episode 1, we ran a Terraform destroy. I've just run a Terraform apply to recreate that server. So now I have my server created with Terraform in the cloud. Now the downside to where we are right now is the server has standard Ubuntu authentication. There are no firewall rules. I don't know. I mean, I just kind of feel like maybe that's not considered best practice. So we want to change that in this video. In this video, we want to create an SSH key and create a firewall rule that allows us to connect to the server via SSH. We will create another firewall rule that allows us to connect over 443 or SSL. Now, I already have my SSH key. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that SSH key as an environment variable. I've never used an environment variable and to pass my SSH key, so I don't know if that's going to work. The other thing I don't know is I don't know if Terraform will let me apply the SSH key to the server after it's been created. So just to show you where we are, created my server, renamed it episode 2. Here's our main TF file. Okay, so it looks like for Terraform to be able to use our environment variable, it has to be prefixed with TF underscore var underscore. I need to do that because I didn't name it that. So I'm going to go change that name. Okay, so I believe what I can do now is I can say resource. I don't know why IntelliSense thought I did this, but I think this is wrong because we're not using a file. I should be able to do, looks like I got to wrap this in quotes. And this must be the string injection format that Terraform uses, but it doesn't like, so it says no variable declaration. So I need to define the variable. So I think I do that, this, and let's see if this works. So I think all I have to do is run Terraform apply. Okay, and it wants the value of the public SSH key, which I thought I was giving it. So it must not be getting it from the environment variables. I created that environment variable after I created this terminal. I wonder if I have to close this terminal and reopen it. So I'm running Terraform apply after recreating this terminal. Nope, same problem. Okay. Okay, one thing I am missing is I do need to tell it that I want to use this SSH key. So the syntax for that is SSH keys equals, and then you can have multiples, so it's an array, so that's the square brackets. And so then we're saying SSH or hcloud SSH key dot default dot ID. I'm not really sure what the ID means or why that's there, but I'm going to try just moving my variables to a variable file and see if that has any impact. And I think you just do that by creating variables.tf. And then I'm going to copy the variable portion of this code to that TF file, save that. Let's see if that doesn't. Let's run, there's a Terraform plan, which is planning the changes. Let's just run this and see. Okay. Okay, I got it to work, and it was a simple but extremely stupid mistake. The variables are case sensitive. So when I typed it into my environment variables, I typed hcloud underscore SSH in all caps. When I populated my SSH key, I typed it all lowercase. So just something to keep in mind. That was kind of silly and embarrassing mistake to make. But okay, there's a couple of things that I've noticed when I hit Terraform apply, and then it's telling me the changes that it's going to make. One is that it's saying episode 1 will be replaced. Now, I thought I renamed everything, but I didn't. I missed this line 16, episode 1. So that's why it's referencing episode 1. The other thing it says it must be replaced, and it's because the SSH key forces a replacement, which is one of the things I was wondering about. If we add an SSH key after the fact, would it require the server to be completely removed and replaced? And it does. So that's pretty critical to know, because you wouldn't want to create a server and then months down the road have to delete it. But if you created it with infrastructure as code and you configured it with Chef or Ansible or something like that, theoretically, it wouldn't be a big deal. And that's part of the reason that you do all this. So I'm fine, because we haven't done anything with this server, for it to go ahead and recreate this server. Okay, so it's finished creating our server, and look at the console, you see we have our server created, but better than that, if you go to security, under SSH keys, we have our SSH key that has been added. Okay, so now I'm attempting to log in and we're able to do it successfully. So we are able to log in to our server using our SSH key. So we know that it's passing the variable and everything's working. So that's awesome. Still, we have the problem, no firewall rules. So we would like to restrict access to our server to specific ports, only the ports that we know we need access on. So we need to set up some firewall rules. And so we can do that in our Terraform file. And what this is saying is this is a firewall for incoming connections over the protocol TCP. We're opening port 22, and then we're opening it for all IP addresses, which isn't really what you want to see. You want to see this open to only specific IP addresses. So you put your IP address in here, but just for demonstration purposes, we're going to go ahead and leave that. The purpose of infrastructure as code is we should be able to make a change like this and it apply to the server. So we've saved this file now. So if I go back to the terminal and I say Terraform plan, this should tell us the changes it's intending to make. And we can see here from the plan that it will create a firewall. Now there's a step that I realized I just missed because yes, we've created the firewall, but we haven't applied the firewall to our server. We can do that like this. And this is an array because you can have multiple firewalls. You Terraform plan again, it's going to not only create the firewall, but it's going to apply it to our server. So let's say Terraform apply. Yes, we want to make these changes and it says it's all complete. So now coming back here to our server, we should be able to check firewalls and see that we do have a default firewall rule. It's applied to one server. It is fully applied, and we come back to our server and we come to its firewalls, we can see that the default rule is applied. So now the question is if we connect via PuTTY, is it going to let us in? And it does. Interestingly, we could change that, right? Where we come here to our firewall rule, and if we said this was 443 for SSL, so it's going to delete the rule that we did have and create the new rule. You can see that this has all been done. If we come here back to our server, our firewalls, we can see this is our default rule, which is any on 443. So now the question is, if I try and connect, is it going to let me? The answer is no. Now that I've created my firewall, and my firewall only allows incoming connections from 443, when I try and connect via PuTTY, which uses port 22, I get a network timed out error. So that doesn't work. So we could change this name. Let's change this name to SSL firewall, and then let's create another one. Okay, so I have the SSL and the SSH firewall, and so then here, this is going to change to SSL, and then I'm going to have the SSH firewall. Now, in my new configuration, I have 443 and I have 22, and I've applied both those firewalls to the server. So now if I run Terraform apply, it tells me that it's going to delete my default firewall. It's going to create an SSH and an SSL firewall, and it's going to apply those firewalls to the server. So looking at our firewalls, we can see our SSH firewall is applied, but our SSL firewall is not applied. So why is that? Is it just a fact that it's currently being applied to the server, or was there an issue? Looks like it was just being applied to the server, so it hadn't fully applied. So now it is. So you can see with those two firewalls both applied, I'm right back to being able to log in to my server. So what have we done? We've taken an SSH key and we've applied it to our Terraform server. It did have to destroy the server to recreate it. That's something that we've noted. We've also built firewall rules to ensure that we can only access the server the way we choose on the ports that we want. So we've really kind of buttoned up our server and made it much more secure. Now, granted, when you're creating your firewall rules for SSH, you would probably want to restrict the IP addresses. So there is improvement that we could go there, but just for a basic tutorial series, this really kind of sets a nice stage and gets us to see the power of infrastructure as code and how quickly we can modify what's in the cloud. One of the things that I'm interested about, though, is what happens when the modification is actually done on the server and the server no longer matches our Terraform file. You notice we have that list of changes that it makes, so it knows what it's expecting to be out there. What happens when what it's expecting doesn't align? I don't know, and I'm interested to find that out. I'm really enjoying learning a lot about infrastructure as code. And if you're enjoying it as well, consider subscribing as we next week get into state management. And we'll create another firewall cryptographically generated. When you think of SSH, you could think of it as a fancy VI. When you think of SSH, you could think of it as like a backstage pass that you're wearing this lanyard and the bouncer lets you through. The only difference is instead of the bouncer checking a list or looking at a badge, they use math, lots and lots of math.